matter what way you look at this, the trailer for James Gunn's Superman is marking a turning point in the world of cinema. It's not the flashiest trailer we've ever seen, it's trying more so to establish a tone and the idea of what Superman is, something that, at this point, a lot of people sort of don't remember. And like any good first trailer for a highly anticipated film, you don't want to give away too much plot, you more so want to give viewers a sense of the vibes, the emotions, the aesthetics of what this film is after. You want to try and capture the heart and soul of the movie without getting too specific or deep with it. And I think this trailer does a really great job of doing so. So many people don't know Clark as this kind-hearted, truly human character with flaws, but the biggest heart anyone could ever have. You guys know how much I love the Zack Snyder interpretation of Superman, so I'm not going to go too much into that, but Snyder painted him in a very specific way, like a mythic figure, and I think it worked for the kind of story he was trying to tell. But ever since, it's kind of been hard to not see him as a god, to lose a bit of the humanity within that character. I know that's not necessarily what Snyder intended, but I think that's unfortunately a byproduct of, I guess, those films in general. Superman is a champion of the human race, the oppressed, the overlooked, the underappreciated, as the reason we can get up in the morning, as hope. And I think, unfortunately, that's been lost a little bit. But before we get into the meat of this, I think there's a moderate importance also to discuss the trailer in terms of what it means for the state of superhero cinema going forward. Cape shit isn't the surefire hit it used to be. Marvel is coming under more fire than it used to, and yeah, Deadpool and Wolverine was a monumental hit, but it hasn't made people feel any more excited for future MCU projects. The superhero genre is on more shaky ground than it ever has been. After having dominated culture for the last 10 years, this Superman movie could quite literally define these films and these kinds of films for at least the next decade. Will it, I guess, usher in a silver age of comic book films, or will it flop and this will be the last straw that broke the camel's back? I mean, I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, the reception of this trailer already has been insanely positive, but you never know. Are superhero movies in the ground? Is the era of director-driven artistic blockbusters back? I mean, I sure hope so. Are people going to believe again that a man can fly? For that, well, we'll just have to wait until July. But for now, we can talk about what we actually got in this new trailer. And right off the bat, I gotta say, I think this thing is a fantastic first look. It filled me with a lot of hope and optimism, and I think it really captured the idea of a man who is the embodiment of good and kindness in a world where those traits are sort of seen as outdated and old-fashioned. That's what James Gunn has more or less said that this film is going to be about, and you definitely get that from the first trailer. A lot of this movie, I think, is going to be focused on what it truly means to be a hero, to actually inspire hope, what sacrifices have to be made, how the world is forced to view you, and how to overcome those insurmountable odds. And that's not just something we're going to see through Clark's eyes, even though Gunn has said that this is very much a story focusing on Clark, Lois, and Lex Luthor. There are other heroes in this film, already established in this world. Hell, we even get to see Crypto the Superdog already, and you know what? He looks amazing. Clark's just a dude with a dog, and the haters can fuck off. The interaction he has with Clark is everything. You just know that dog is going to absolutely destroy a kaiju later in the movie, and I can't wait for it. Anyway, the other heroes of this world are clearly coming from different perspectives than Clark, and this could even be giving him a crisis of faith as Superman. The Justice League of this world, or I'm assuming it's the Justice League, I don't actually know if they are the Justice League, is currently a corporately run superhero team, said to be funded by Maxwell Lord, but there could definitely be some monetary influence from Lex. The way that this trailer at least hints at those ideas, it basically feels like a rebuttal to The Boys, which is a show and story fully focused on the vain problems that come from the evil Superman archetype when controlled by a corporation. James Gunn is here to reclaim that idea. He's here to tell us what Superman really stands for, what he has stood for this whole time, what stories like this have taken away from Big Blue. This corporatization of hope, of heroism, is one of the many things Superman is going to be fighting against. Superman has always stood for the people of the working class, and a team that keeps a Green Lantern on payroll is basically everything he hates. It's a system that goes against the inherent sacrifice and nobility that comes with being a hero. You aren't in it for gain. You aren't in it so that at the end of the day you can have a dental plan. You're in it to make the world a better place, no matter the cost. We get the one scene where we see Guy Gardner, goddamn Nathan Fillion, looking great as comic-accurate Guy Gardner, walking in being the classic dick we know him to be. And everyone complaining about the Guy Gardner haircuts or the fact that Superman moves in slow motion to punch through glass. Do we forget, what comic books are, right? So much goofy shit happens in comic books because it looks cool. It's stylized for a reason. Even the Guy Gardner haircut, the fact that he looks like that, the fact that he looks comic accurate is because he's a fucking asshole, and it's funny to dress him up in this way that undercuts the persona that he puts out into the world. So I don't really understand what people are going for with this. We don't want super realism in this adaptation. We've gotten that countless times before. We want something that is true to the spirit of the comics, and that's what James Gunn promised, and I think that's what this trailer promised. So it's a fantasy. Who fucking cares if it defies logic? It's still consistent with the internal logic of superhero movies and Superman as a character. And it's clear he's taking inspiration from the DC animated universe in terms of giving us a lived-in world already existing, already in progress. Superheroes exist here. Superman exists as a person. We don't need to do the origin thing again. We can just cut to the chase and explore the world as we know it from the comics. I think it's a really refreshing take on it. And the visuals, I really don't know what to say. If you think that this looks bad, if you think the color looks bad, I mean, this thing is vibrant as all hell. It looks great. If you don't like the way that James Gunn and his DP orbit the camera or move the camera, I mean, what did you expect, right? This is kind of what he's done in the past 3 superhero films that he's been tackling. This is his signature style. You wanted a James Gunn Superman movie. This is what it looks like. And I think at the end of the day, we're going to sit down. It's going to hit us in the feels. It's also going to look great. I mean, this is putting to shame every other superhero blockbuster that is currently coming out. This thing has pizzazz, it's got style, it's got color. I mean, you might not be digging what they're doing with the color, but I think it's going to look good in the context of the film. The cinema sinsification of the discourse around this movie is truly baffling. And I think the sooner that we stop putting this film under a microscope and just kind of embrace what James Gunn is doing with this, I think the better off we're going to be in the long run. Okay, now let's get back to the rest of the video of me gushing about how great this trailer is. And we see Superman looking exhausted, maybe even sad in the corner of the frame as Guy walks in. Maybe this could be him trying to level with Supes, maybe trying to tell him that sooner or later he should just give in to being as cynical as them, to selling out and being another corporate stooge, because that's all the world wants. No one cares about virtue or goodness. It's old-fashioned. In fact, they actually hate you for it. So why care about them? Just take the mission from the higher-ups, keep your head down, and move on. I think this film is really about Superman refusing and rebelling against that because it's who he is. He will look up because it's what needs to be done. And I think you see how that already inspires people to make a change. Even people on the Justice League and other superheroes existing in this world. But even within that horrible business-focused world, people are still inspired to have hope, to believe in Superman, as we see with the little boy who raises the flag. No matter how insurmountable the odds seem, people still care, people still hope, people will still look up. And with that being said, I think that's something Superman is going to teach to this set of heroes as well. The true way to be a hero. We get a shot of Metamorpho in this trailer as well, and even though we don't know much about him in the movie from what we know of him in the comics, I think we can figure out part of his journey here. Rex Mason was horribly disfigured when he became Metamorpho, rejected by modern society because he became a monster. But outside of all of that, he still decides to be a hero. But what if he doesn't at first? The guy who literally assisted in turning him into a monster, Simon Stagg, is clearly at least around in this universe. Maybe he's using Metamorpho, manipulating him out of fear of rejection, making him do the dirty work that so many billionaires get away with at the cost of so many other people's lives. Clark might be able to show Metamorpho that there is another way to fight back, that you get to decide what kind of person you get to be. You can be a hero, no matter who you are. You can give the hope in the world that you want to see manifested there. And that could also affect the members of the Justice League. Mr. Terrific is also set to have a prominent role, and maybe he's already hesitant about what is going on in this strange corporate world of capes and cowls. The reason Superman is so important of a character is because when we look at him, we believe that we can be better. We know that there is good in all of us, that the world isn't always as dark as we think it is. Even the fucking color of the movie is telling us this, something that everyone is ragging on because apparently everyone is a color expert now for movies, even though we've just started wading through a decade plus of gray sludge being forced into our eyes. Like, this thing is a vibrant spark of life in the bleak landscape of blockbuster cinema, but I mean more specifically in the bleak landscape of superhero cinema. There's something cold about the way the world around him is depicted, and the only sparks of warmth brilliantly come through in the presence of Superman. He is the light trying to warm up the cynical world around him. You see that in the color, you see that in his appearance. He stands in stark contrast to the world around him, trying to make the world feel less cold, less bland, less malignant. That base decision is so key to understanding the character of Superman. That's what Clark represents. That's how he is a hero. Not because he's more powerful than a locomotive, faster than a speeding bullet, or can jump tall buildings in a single bound. No. But because he cares. He truly cares. The thing is, though, Clark may not always know the best way to do that. We're clearly not at the beginning of Superman's career in this film. He has Krypto. Luthor clearly already hates him. His relationship with Lois seems moderately developed at this point, but that doesn't mean Clark is always standing on solid ground. One of the greatest quotes about Superman comes from, of course, Grant Morrison, who said, "They say he's too powerful. You can't give him problems. But Superman is a metaphor. For me, Superman has the same problems we do, but on a Paul Bunyan scale. If Superman walks the dog, he walks it around the asteroid belt because it can fly in space. When Superman's relatives visit, they come from the 31st century and bring some hellish monster conqueror from the future. But it's still a story about your relatives visiting." And from even the opening shot, hell, the thumbnail of the trailer, you can tell James Gunn took those ideas to heart. Clark always has felt a lot of love for the world, but what happens when it feels like the entire world is wholeheartedly rejecting you? Even when you're doing your best to make a difference, you get some dickhead who throws a can at your head. It's not the problems of a dragon attacking the city, that's something Clark can handle. It's how to make people believe in him, to believe in Superman. I think it's very clear that he and Jonathan Kent are talking about something of that matter on the Kent farm. How even a man who can hold the world on his shoulders, literally, can feel small. How the world will try and crush you and keep you down, but it's your job to rise above that. I mean, the whole thing Lex Luthor has against Superman is the insecurity within himself that the existence of Superman sows. Lex wants so desperately to tear Superman down because of what he could represent that he never sees him for who he is. He tries to kill Superman not because Lex is evil, but for the inherent flaws the existence of this quote-unquote perfect man would point out in Lex. He so hates Superman because the existence of Superman proves the error in his ways. It exposes him as being the problem and that he doesn't have to be the way he is, the corporate bad guy. He could take his power and resources and do good with them, but actively refuses not to because of his own vanity and ego. Lex hates Superman because his existence exposes an insecurity. I know it's not a lot, but the little moments we get from him really speak to that, and you get a sense that this is something that's been building ever since Superman arrived on the scene. He probably thought he could be bought and paid for like the other guys, and when he couldn't, I think that's when we reach the tipping point where we're at in this film. But that's just the Lex side of things. What about Clark? How does that make Clark feel? How would words hurt the Man of Steel? How can that shake his morals, his ideas, his want to help? It's something we've all had to go through with a crisis of our own, but to have the people who love you help you as much as you can help them, their support matters and is just as much a superpower as X-ray vision. It's what makes this character so strong, his support system. And also having your dog drag you through the snow, because that's awesome. It builds character. This is the first time we've also seen in a trailer for a Superman movie where he is on the back foot, where the problems aren't a big world-ending machine. I mean, it's a kaiju, so I guess, it's maybe a step below it. Or Lex Luthor trying to blow up a dam to make a new beachfront property, because for some reason that's the plot of the original Superman movie, and yes, if you're wondering, it absolutely slaps. It's a great film. I support Gene Hackman Lex Luthor and his smaller, silly ideas. It's great. But this Superman, the new Superman, is the first time that he has felt like the Superman. Not Superman through the lens of Zack Snyder or Richard Donner. This is Superman from the comics. Now you're probably thinking, well, no shit, yeah, this is Superman from the comics, that's what all of this is about. But over the past decade or so, we've never really gotten to see that comic-accurate version of Clark on screen. For as much as I love Cavill in the role of Clark, he never really got to feel like Superman. He obviously had problems, and they were quintessential Superman problems, but it was also in the larger scale. They were seen through the lens of a god. And that's how Zack Snyder wanted to tell those stories. To him, these were modern Greek myths, and I love that interpretation, and I think it's so effective. People crafted from porcelain and descended from the heavens to deal with the problems of man. But the thing that makes these characters actually interesting is that even though they have the power of a god on their shoulders, they are not interested in being a god. We get a little bit of that in the Snyder films, but not to the fullest extent. Superman would rather go to the park and have a fun yoga class with Lois, or just get to hang out with his best pal Jimmy Olsen and eat a hot dog, because at his core, Clark is just a guy like you or me, a guy that, yes, can fly and shoot lasers out of his eyes, but outside of that, you'd never think Clark would harm a fly. He's so kind-hearted and unassuming. And that, to me, indicates that this Superman is purely inspired by the comics. We're not necessarily riffing on past iterations or cinematic influences. It's bringing a comic book to life. And even the visuals represent this. It's not the typical graphic novel approach to these films, like what we've seen for the better part of the last 20 years. No, the visuals feel reminiscent of certain comic book art that highlights the object of a panel and leaves the background less detailed. I think that's why I like the look of this film, the almost overexposed highlights that give focus to the important elements of a scene. And I know everyone is talking about the fact that this movie looks bad because it's by the guy who shot Flash or whatever, but I mean, let's take a step back here. Yes, the director of photography on Superman shot Flash. The cinematography in Flash isn't the issue with that movie, it's the CGI, it's the borderline unfinished VFX, it's not the actual camera movements and lighting and color. But even that, I'll concede The Flash isn't the greatest looking superhero film ever made, but this director of photography has also worked with James Gunn on Guardians of the Galaxy 2, Guardians of the Galaxy 3, The Suicide Squad. He is James Gunn's guy, his DP. James Gunn trusts him, and whenever they collaborate, we get some of the most striking images in a comic book film imaginable. So I think we need to hold off here. We need to pump the brakes just a little bit. The movie's going to look good. It's going to be fine. Let's just chill out for a second. Don't judge him because he shot the Flash. Something that's become increasingly important in modern Superman comics is the feeling of family. Clark having Supergirl, Lois, his son John, Connor, Keenan, Otho Ra, and Ozul Ra, they're what make him feel alive. The fact that he has people he can rely on, and all of this is clearly not already established in the world of this new Superman, but he does have his support system. He has Lois, his parents, Jimmy, and even if they don't understand him for everything he is, they support him. They help to give him hope because that's what these stories are about. Rising above, giving people hope, coming together, and the way they tell these stories just so happens to involve a man in a blue unitard flying through the sky, destroying meteors with his bare hands. And I think this film is going to see the larger world around him reach a tipping point, and that's when we're going to see that larger kaiju conflict come into play. And it's going to be what pushes people to Superman, because he's the only one willing to do the job and do the right thing instead of threat assess and see if it's advantageous like the other guys. He's seen saving and protecting people when the others can't be seen. It's okay for people to feel cynical and hopeless given the state of things. It's understandable even, but that's why they need to look up and believe and hope for something greater and better. And I think it's clearly not easy for Clark. I think it hurts him a lot to be this social pariah, and I'm sure he struggles with whether or not he should continue doing it the way he has been. For too long now, people have seen Superman as boring. He's not interesting because he can do too much. But if that's what you think, what do you want? Truly, what are you looking for in a story like this? Do you just want a guy who looks at the sky as a giant monster, destroys a skyscraper, and says, wish I sure could do something about that before being crushed by rubble? I mean, Superman is about so much more than that. Superman, for having all of these issues, is about us. All of us. The things that have made his greatest stories are those moments of connection. The stories that are literally inspiring this film. All-Star Superman, Superman for all seasons. The engine that makes these stories move is the human element. All-Star Superman is a story of Clark in his last year alive because of radiation from the sun, but still, he wants to do more. He wants to help. And yeah, it's fun to watch him have to fight the villain of each issue, but what means something to us, what connects us to him, is the moments of him connecting with people. When he saves a girl from a rooftop, not once she's jumped, but just by talking to her, by sacrificing himself because it's the right thing to do, because it saves those he loves most. Superman for all seasons has us connect with him at the very beginning of his career, but even then, he feels like Superman. His problems aren't that different from us because he's being faced with the same fears we all have when we first have to go out on our own. He's scared for what it's going to be like to have to grow up, what life is going to have in store for him. And yeah, we watch him save Metropolis from a poisonous gas attack, but what's more important is at the end when he connects with a kid, when he smiles at him and flies away after they exchange a few words. When he flies away, he doesn't see himself as bigger than him, as more, because that's who he is. That's who Clark is, and that's what he brings to the world. He is that beacon of hope coming from the things that we hold most dear. He's the reason that when we are struggling, we might think of ourselves to hold on just a little bit more. He's the reason that hope can persevere in a world that seemingly is so filled with hate, a world where it feels like everything is falling apart. We don't know the details necessarily of this movie from this trailer alone. He'll fight Lex, he'll be the hero of Metropolis, he'll do the standard Superman thing. But what we can learn from this trailer is who Clark is going to be, what he is going to mean to not just those around him in this world, but to us. How he maybe challenges the idea of superheroes that are already existing in this world and charts out a new legacy for them. I mean, there was a reason this film was going to be titled Superman Legacy, and this trailer tells us how special it's going to be for that kid who has loved Superman his whole life to sit in that theater and get to see hope personified on the screen. To see what it means to love, to have compassion, to care even for those that might hate you. He's the reason that when we all walk out of that theater in July, we'll all have a reason to look up.